Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Step Up, Make a Difference podcast. I'm Mike Peacock, co-host. Marty Durden is with me. Dr. Marty Durden is with me. And this week, Marty, we have a special guest. And look on the screen, folks. This is 3/4 of one of the greatest trivia teams in Muskogee County, the Wackadoodles. The Wednesday night Wackadoodles. We are joined by Coach Larry Morgan. He's been around these parts for quite a while now. And Marty, you've known Larry quite a long time, so give Larry a proper introduction.
Yes, Larry Morgan is our esteemed guest tonight. We're honored to have him. In wrestling coaches circles, he is nothing short of a legend, really. And he is in the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. He has coached guys who wrestled in college, who are successful businessmen, who are great fathers. I mean, his work speaks for itself in the lives of the wrestlers he dealt with. And he's a perfect guest for Step Up, because he has stepped up in so many young men's lives down through the decades. And in the Columbus area, there are people all over, young men all over, that he coached. And I taught them those lessons of hard work, ethical behavior, and they're living examples of what Larry has believes. And that's why Larry is the perfect example for us to interview here on Step Up. And plus, he is extremely gifted at trivia. And he comes up with answers I don't even know the questions, and he knows the answer in detail. So, Larry, we're just proud to have you, man.
Yeah, and Larry, you get that way. You get gifted at trivia because you've been around a bit and you've been around a while, right? You know, that's how we sometimes pick up these things we're able to answer in trivia. We're well traveled and we got a few miles on us.
Yeah, as long as it's not 90s alternative rock, we're good.
Absolutely. But Larry, let's kind of get your story a little bit and kind of go back to your early times, and just sort of bring us through how you got into coach, where you grew up first, and talk about your background a little bit and how you got into coaching and sort of bring it in from that direction a little bit.
Well, how I got into wrestling, I played on a basketball team at Ledgemont, and we lost the game 126-9, and I never got off the bench. So I decided I wasn't a very good basketball player. So I decided to go out for wrestling because there's 14 spots and they were only filling 12 of them. So I figured I would get a spot immediately, which I did. So I wrestled for 2 years and had a very unillustrious career as a wrestler. Went to college at Kent State, and my first job was at Beechwood Middle School. And at Beechwood, they wanted a middle school wrestling coach. They were going to start a program, and they asked if anybody wanted to coach it. And, of course, everybody stepped back one, which put me in the front. So I said, yeah, I wrestled a very little bit. So I started at Beechwood Middle School, and I learned a great deal of wrestling from their head coach, Dominic Imarino, who's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. So from there, eventually I went to Florida, and I coached in Florida for 10 years. And then I went to the Brookstone School for about 13 years, and then Columbus High School for 10 years. And I finished out my career as a volleyball coach, and I really knew nothing about volleyball. So I was more the driver of the volleyball team. But the coaches at Northside were very good. So it was an interesting journey, a lot sort of by accident. And I've learned so much from the people I've been around. I didn't really become a head coach until I came to Brookstone. But I worked under 3 gentlemen who are all in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, and I learned a great deal from them. So, you know, I learned wrestling as an assistant coach, really.
interesting, Larry, because you use the words "everybody step back." And,
What's that?
You stepped up. Everybody
Yeah, I
stepped
did
back.
step up all right because everybody else stepped back. But I could tell you a few things about some wrestlers that impacted my life. A lot of times coaches talk about how they impact kids' lives, but sometimes I think just the opposite, the kids impact your life. So if you don't mind, I'd like to speak a little about how Willie Sargable then helped Gaddy Sofer, who then helped Nick Ackerman, because it's a very unusual circumstance. When I went to East Bay High School in Gibsonton, Florida, my wife, who was teaching math as well as me, she sent me over this blonde, curly-haired kid who had wrestled in Maryland and said he'd like to wrestle. So he came by. He looked about 130 pounds, looked pretty strong, sophomore. I said, yeah, you look good. Come on. I gave him the paperwork and stuff and sent him back. And at lunch, he said, would you notice anything about him? I said, yeah, he has blonde, curly hair. He said, you didn't notice he didn't have a leg? I said, what do you mean doesn't have a leg? He's in jeans. Said, yeah, he's an amputee. I said, this kid's an amputee? Yeah. I said, well, I've never coached an amputee, but we'll see what happens. Well, he was a very good wrestler and became a really good wrestler, but he also had some, I won't say mischievous, but he liked to pull some pranks. So really most people didn't know he was an amputee. So we, our first match, he goes to the assistant principal called WD, Walking Death, because he paddled people so hard. And he went up to WD and said, do you mind if you hold something during the match for me? So WD's expecting, watch or jewelry or something. So he's in his full sweats. He gets ready to go. He takes off his prosthetic leg and hands it to the assistant principal. Well, the guy dropped it and jumped back like the snake had bit him. So that was the introduction that everybody found out Willie had a prosthetic leg. And the other time that I remember he sort of pulled a prank was we were wrestling Brandon High School, who had won 450 matches in a row, the nation's longest winning streak in any sport. They were featured on ESPN, and they're a very famous program. And I had coached under their head coach, Russ Cozart. But we're in the coach's office, and I have Willie in there with his full sweats. He says, how's your team? I said, well, we're not your level, but we do have some tough kids. Oh, really? He said, yeah. Well, I was throwing some darts at the dartboard. I said, yeah, for instance, this kid, I take the dart and I throw it on it to hit his prosthetic leg. So it sticks in his leg. So the coach, thinking I'm throwing a dart and hit the kid's leg, and he's not moving, he's not complaining or anything. He just walks out shaking his head like, whoa, these kids are pretty tough. So anyway, I eventually moved to Brookstone School, and I got that job because I was at the Olympic trials in Pensacola, and just so happened the guy sitting across from me was the principal at Brookstone that I'd known from Tampa. And he came over and said, hey, where are you at? I said, East Bay. He said, I could really use a wrestling coach up here at Brookstone. I said, well, who's your coach now? He said, well, it's me. And I said, yeah, you do need help. And so he said, yeah, come on up. So I came up to Brookstone, and my first year, there's this little kid, Gaddy Sofer, in my class. Now, Gaddy, looked about 85 pounds, had jeans on, everything. So I'm reading my amateur wrestling news, and I noticed this article about Willie Sargable when he won state his senior year at East Bay. And, the whole thing had some quotes by me in it. And this little kid, I said, well, why don't you wrestle? He said, well, I can't. I said, why can't you wrestle? I'm not allowed to. I said, why aren't you allowed to wrestle? He said, well, I don't have any feet. So again, in jeans and shoes, I didn't know this kid didn't have any feet. But he said, well, I said, that's no problem. I said, come up here. And I showed him the article by Willie Sargable that talked about a kid who had just won state with one leg. And I said, you've had the same operation on both legs, but I don't see that would be a big problem. He said, well, the school I was at said I can't wrestle because it'd be too dangerous for me and for my opponents. Well, I said, well, you're a new school now. So I said, you're going to have the opportunity if your parents will let you. Well, the parents were very reticent to let him wrestle, but eventually they did. And, Gaddy wrestled 8th grade year, he went to tournaments, and originally his brother was a state champion for us, and his brother didn't want him to take off his prosthetic legs to wrestle. And I told him, I said, you have to take those legs off. They're like anchors for you. Plus, they add 2 weight classes to you. If you weigh in without the prosthetics, you're lighter and you'll be better. So eventually we told his brother to go off in a corner somewhere, and we told him to take off his prosthetic legs. And the first match we wrestled was up in Troup County. And he said, Coach, everybody's staring at me because I'm different. I said, no, they're staring at you because they're amazed at what you can do. So Gaddy eventually, kept wrestling, kept getting better. His freshman year, he didn't make varsity because we had another freshman who was state champion for us at that weight. And Gaddy weighed 88 pounds, and the weight class is 105. So eventually, his sophomore year, the 103 moved up to 12 or 20, kept eating. And Gaddy was about 95, 98 pounds, so we put him in at 105. And he wrestled very well. He conditioned. He was a state champion as a sophomore. He was a state champion as a junior, and he was a state champion as a senior. So a 3-time state champion in wrestling, this double amputee. They did a special with him in the magazine. I'm sure you're used to Bigger, Faster, Stronger. And they showed him in the weight room. He was leg pressing 260. And he weighs 100. And he's with his little stumps pushing the machine up. And then he also, as 103, was bench pressing 220 pounds. So he was pretty strong for his weight. And of course, his first years at state, I think everybody felt sorry for him. He got a standing ovation, etc. But his senior year, he was wrestling a kid. The host school was our Marty, and there was a grandfather up there, and Frank Bickerstaff, one of our wrestling parents, was sitting next to me. And the parent, I guess he was the grandparent of the kid Gaddy was going to wrestle. He said, that Sofer boy, he has a big advantage with no feet. And Frank looked over at him and said, well, sir, I got me a chainsaw in the back of my truck. I can bring it out, and we can even this match up. So that shut up Grandpa real quick. And then when Gaddy came out, some people were booing him. And Gaddy said, that's the best feeling I've ever had. He says, because now people don't feel sorry for me. They've accepted me. They know I'm tough, and now they're afraid of me. And he said, so it's just a great feeling. So I think there's a full circle, And when Gaddy started, Willie wrote him a letter of encouragement. Well, I got a letter. Somebody from Iowa had seen the article on Gaddy in one of the magazines and said they just had a kid who had a farming accident and lost a leg, and could Gaddy write him a letter encouraging him. So Willie wrote Gaddy a letter. Gaddy wrote a kid named Nick Ackerman a letter, and Nick Ackerman went on to be the Division II national champion in wrestling. So just the happenstance, the divine intervention, whatever you want to call it, that I had 2 amputees with the same operation that wrestled for me, about state champion, a 3-time state champion. And then they encouraged a kid who eventually became a national champion. So, those are the things as a coach that obviously you can't predict, but they're just special moments for you. Yeah. So that was a long answer to a short question.
Oh, man, what a story. And, that's the whole point of I think you get it, Larry, just like Mike and I do. Coaching is not about winning and trophies and accolades. It's about what we do in the lives of kids, right? There was and I remember this story one day. When I was at Brookstone, we were coaching at the same school, and a young man was playing basketball for me. Big, tall, big, strong guy. And he was not really doing that well. And he came in my office and talked to me. And I said, well, have you ever thought about wrestling? You know where I'm going with the story, don't you? Remember this one?
I had a few. I always told the kids the best day of their life is when they get cut from the basketball team.
Yes,
I
that's right.
But I said it could be Andy Wallman. He was one of them, but there could be somebody else.
It was Quinlan. Remember?
Oh, okay, Jason Quinlan.
Quinlan.
Yes,
who became a wrestling coach.
Yes,
and
very good one.
And so that was the idea of two coaches who forgot about their egos and thought about what was best for kids. And look how that came out. And so if you're a coach out there listening, it's not about our record. It's not about results. It's about what are we doing to help young men and women to be the best they can be in life and put them in a spot where they can succeed.
Yeah, those kids, they always come back to see their coach when you think about it. I mean, I don't have a lot of kids that came back to see me as a math teacher, but I've had hundreds of them come back to talk to me as a coach. In fact, I was having dinner with Gaddy and his brother Benny in Philadelphia at the NCAAs this year. And both of them were talking about the influence that coaches and especially I had on them. And Gaddy said, Coach, you believed in me when even my parents didn't. He said, because they didn't want me to wrestle. They didn't think I could do it. He said, but you believed in me. And I think that's, as coaches, that's what we do. And I really appreciate, like you said, Marty, you're one of the coaches that if a kid isn't great at your sport, maybe they get cut, you encourage them to do a different thing. I've always, like I said, I always tell them, best day of your life, you got cut from
Right.
from the basketball team. Now, and that's why I say, like, I don't believe in quitting teams. I believe if you start, you should finish. But I also I believe you can quit a sport and go into something better suited for you. As I found out in basketball, when you're the 15th man on a 13-man roster, you don't have a big future in basketball. So that's when I decided to go out for wrestling. And again, I was not a good wrestler, and I wouldn't have been a good wrestling coach except that I learned from a lot of different people. So I didn't immediately want to say I need to be a head coach. Sometimes you need to be an assistant coach and learn from people so you're ready to be a head coach.
And tell us today, what is Gaddy doing today?
What did Gaddy do?
What is Gaddy doing today with his life?
Okay, well, Gaddy, went to Harvard. He got 2 degrees from Harvard, 2 degrees from Columbia. He opened up a stem cell research company. He wrestled at Harvard. And his brother Benny, both of them live in Princeton, New Jersey now. And his son is now, one of his sons is 18 years old, getting ready to go to college, and the other son's in 5th grade. And Benny is married, has a son who wrestled in New Jersey, and is married to a Chinese language professor at Princeton. So they've been pretty successful. And, Gaddy, did he get into Harvard because of wrestling? No. He got into Harvard because he's a brilliant student. But I think wrestling, Harvard likes to accept people that have certain individual characteristics that are different than others. So I think that helped him. I know the first time I went to Harvard, he called me up and said, Coach, I could get a handicap sticker and park really close to my dorm. I said, yeah, that's fine. He said, but I really don't think I need a handicap sticker. I've never felt like I was handicapped, and that might be needed for somebody else. And I said, well, I think you get it then, He never looked at himself as handicapped. Yeah, I mean, today we use the term physically challenged, and yeah, he was physically challenged, but kids find a way to overcome those things. And we see that in every sport and every instance.
That's amazing. Last year, I was teaching a class at Shorter, and there's a big basketball player, big 6'9" guy in my class, and he had hurt his leg, and it was a bad injury and didn't look like he was going to get to play. And so we stopped by the office, and it was woe is me. I feel sorry for myself, all that. So I got on my computer and I pulled up Gaddy. And the article that you mentioned, Bigger, Faster, Stronger, with Dr. Greg Shepard, a legend in weightlifting. And he had an interview with Gaddy. And I said, just read this story. And this young man read that story and he says, Coach, wow, I don't have a problem. I'm going to overcome mine. I said, yes, you are. And so Gaddy's still being an inspiration to people he doesn't even know today because he, like you say, he didn't feel handicapped.
Yeah, and both these kids, Willie and Gaddy, had were thalidomide babies. And, that's happened in, I guess, the 60s, 70s, where the mothers, when they're pregnant, they took thalidomide, and it caused birth defects. And both of them had exactly the same thing, where the foot was like twisted, and they would never learn to walk correctly. And so they usually had an operation, amputation, like at mid-calf, okay, just so, and at an early age, like at 2 years old, so they would be able to learn to walk with prosthetics and, be better. Now, of course, one time with Willie, one problem was he broke one of his legs, and luckily it was the prosthetic leg. So they sent him a new leg. The only, I won't say problem, but difference is they sent him a black leg. So we called him our mixed wrestler. He had one white leg and one black leg. but yeah, I mean, they first of all, walking around, I could not tell anything different. Now, I do remember his senior year at State, Gaddy, again, being sort of a prankster himself, he put his prosthetic legs on backwards. He put his warm-up on backwards. So his feet are pointing back, his shirt is there, and he walked out backwards, so it looked like his head was screwed on backwards. So everybody's looking, and like, here's somebody walking out, their feet are walking out, their jacket's fine, but their head, it's the back of their head and facing the other way. And it was confusing to many. The people who knew him were just hilarious. And this was before the state finals. So I think that's one of the things that's important is even in the state finals, don't take it too seriously. It's not the end all, have fun doing it.
Wow.
And Larry, telling those stories about those two kids, a lot of people might be noticing the parallels between a movie they've seen called Unstoppable.
Yes.
That was about Anthony Robles, who also was a national champion. Was it at Southern California?
No, he was a national champ at Arizona State.
Arizona State. I knew I had the colors right. I just didn't have the school right.
Yeah. One of my kids that I coached on the Florida national team, he's the assistant coach at Arizona State. So he coached and helped coach Anthony Robles. Don Cheadle's character, the head coach then, I've been out with him sharing a few sodas in Milledgeville. They always had a wrestling camp in Milledgeville that I attended. Sean Charles was his name. So, yeah, I'm pretty aware of him. I saw that his national championship match, Anthony, that he won it all. In fact, we were sitting real close to his mother, and she was going crazy. But, yeah, he's a great story. The movie Unstoppable, J-Lo's in it, Don Cheadle's in it. It's a great movie.
Yeah. If you haven't seen it, anybody watching, if you haven't seen that, you need to look it up and watch it. It is a great movie. It's very well done. It's not sometimes when you watch sports movies, they're a little bit unbelievable because the characters don't look like they belong in the movie. And I've seen baseball movies before where the guys throwing, you could tell right away they weren't baseball players. And it didn't seem realistic. But this movie was very realistic, had a lot of realism in it, and the characters all did a great job. And it's got some big names. You mentioned Don Cheadle, you mentioned J-Lo. I mean, there's some great actors in that movie, and it was just really well done, and it's a great story. And it goes right along what Larry was talking about with the wrestlers that he had, and not allowing their deficit, as a lot of people would see it, to keep them from achieving great things. And a lot of that has to do with guidance they get. A lot of it has to do with leadership they get, but a lot of it has to do with their sheer determination as well. And all of them have gone. All three of those folks, Robles, Gaddy, and Nick, have all gone on to do tremendous things, despite what people may have judged them to be at a disadvantage. And I think that's something that everybody needs to take.
Another book to look at is the Kyle Maynard story. Kyle's a wrestler here in Georgia that was a quadriplegic, no arms and no legs, and he wrestled for Collins Hill High School. Now, he wasn't like a state champion, but think of the disadvantage there.
Oh,
He
yeah.
won like 18 matches at the 6A division. So just remarkable. And there's a book, I can't remember the title right now, but if you look up Kyle Maynard, they'll have his book that he wrote, and it's a great story too. I mean, I'm really happy that our TV stations, now ESPN especially, is doing like more stuff with Paralympics and showing people that are physically challenged and doing great things, because I think it's important. Like in the wrestling room when Gaddy was there, that to see somebody like him outwork everybody in the room. When we did sprints on his little stumps, he could beat everybody up and down the mat. He was just quicker. I never saw anybody when he wrestled hold him down more than 10 seconds. And that included, we went down to Florida and worked out with Jared Frayer, who's second in the NCAA. He's just made the last U.S. Olympic team. And Jared was maybe ninth grade when Gaddy was a sophomore, and they were working out together. And Jared won 4 state titles in Florida, is assistant coach right now at Virginia Tech. And Gaddy could get out from under him in 10 seconds. He said, I can't. He said, I ankle pick a lot. There's no ankles to pick. I said, you're right. You got to change your wrestling a little bit too. So it is disadvantageous in some ways, but in some ways there honestly was an advantage. And you have to adjust his style to his style and teach him things that'll work for him. Which sort of gets me to another point is I see a lot of coaches say, treat everybody equally. And I disagree with that. I think you need to have team rules, but I think you treat everybody differently because some kids you can yell at, some kids you can't yell at. Some kids can do a high crotch, some kids will never get it. Okay. So I always say I'm going to treat everybody differently, but I'm going to treat everybody fairly. Yeah, I think that's what we want, right. Fairness. But, obviously in basketball, you teach a postman differently than you teach a point guard. So you have to take in and especially psychologically, some kids just, if you yell at them, just melt down. And I've learning from volleyball, coaching girls, there is a difference in the psychology of coaching girls and coaching boys. Yes, so, you have to think about that.
Well, and, we've talked about this before. Marty and I have talked about this before and with some other coaches is you really do teams a disservice when you try to treat everybody the same on a team. Because, like you're saying, the psyches are different. The emotions are different. The situations around every kid is different. And you can scream at one kid in the face and it will motivate him. And you will get that result by the loud talk and the getting in his face. And then you can do that to the kid standing next to him and you can scare him away and he'll never come back. And it's just coaches have to take time to build those relationships with athletes and figure out what makes them tick. And a lot of coaches, unfortunately, there are a lot of coaches in our society today who think they don't have time to do that. They don't want to take the time to do that. They're all about result. And they end up alienating some kids instead of helping. And that's what this podcast is all about, is to try to help guys who are in coaching or going into coaching realize how big it is to build a culture where everybody is going to be treated fairly and everybody's going to be treated much the same way, but you're not necessarily going to be coached the same way. You're going
to you have to take in the individual differences. Yeah. Exactly right. And one thing I think we sort of neglect in coaching a lot is the psychological part of it. I always look at my job as a coach is to sort of be a pressure relief valve. Okay. Kids put enough pressure on themselves. You have to make it so it's not the biggest thing in the world. I remember John McKay, the old football coach at USC and then Tampa Bay. He used to say, there's 1 billion people in China that don't even know this game's happening today. You know what I'm saying? That it is an important thing. We want to do well, but it's not life or death. Yeah, I always tell my kids, the sun will come up tomorrow. Whether we win or lose, the sun will come up tomorrow. It just comes up a little brighter if you win.
Yeah, that's right. That line, I think, came from Yogi Berra, who was the guy who pitched the perfect game in the World Series back in the day?
Don Larson?
Don Larson, yeah.
Yeah.
So that would have been, by the way, that would be a great trivia question for us, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But when he had the last batter in the game, Yogi Berra was catching for Don Larson, and he needed one out, and I think he had a 0-2 count, no 2-0 count on the hitter. So Berra called timeout, and that's when he said, "I just want you to know there's 8 million people in China who don't give a about
Right.
if you throw a strike or not," and I think that's one of those yogi-isms. And I think, Larry, you were extremely successful with young people because you are, without calling yourself, you're a servant leader, man, because you care more about the kids and the welfare of the kids than you do about yourself. And you know that it's all, coaching is one big giant relationship. That's all it is. We think that we're X's and O's and all of those things. That's not what coaching is all about. It's about building relationships with players, and you call it the psychological aspect, and that is exactly what it is. And that's what coaches, I think especially young coaches, miss when we come into the profession. It's about a person, and a person, and not a number, not a name in a book, not a scoreboard. It's about people.
Right. They become your kids. They really become your kids. And I know in wrestling, you wake up at 5 a.m. to make weigh-ins in Atlanta at 7. You wrestle till 11 at night, and then you get on the bus. And first of all, you got to go eat. Then you get back into Columbus at 1 a.m. So you've been with them since 5 a.m. to 1 the next morning. And that's the thing in wrestling. You honestly live with the kids. And of course, then you go to camps and you're with them. So you really become a parent to them. And some of them, you might be their only male role model. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, yes, servant leadership is about service. You're serving them. You're making them better people. And yes, definitely you have to check your ego at the door. And, yeah, we all love to win, but that's obviously not the most important thing. The most important thing is to compete, to have a good time. As a coach, don't run them off. I had a little kid at Columbus High, Kendall Talley. He's freshman year, he went 1-26. Okay, but he's hung with it. His senior year, took 3rd in the state. So that type of kid, don't run him off. Some people say, "Man, I was only 1-26. I don't like this." Well, I don't like losing either. But to win, you have to lose some. You're learning something. You're a freshman. Yeah. You never wrestled before. Eventually, you're going to be good. And he eventually was very good, One thing I do with my kids, I did this with wrestling, I do it with volleyball, is I made little, bookmarks, note cards, whatever. Steve Stinson would laminate them for me. And on the back, I would put the poem If by Kipling. Keep your wits about you when everybody else is losing theirs. I've seen a lot of coaches that doesn't apply. They go crazy. And I just write sort of my 10 commandments, and it changes weekly, but or at least yearly. But some of the things I wrote down, a couple that I put, like one was make a way home. Everybody worries about, we're going to the other school. I said, just like in Hoosiers when he measures the hoop, wrestling, I can measure the mat. It's 40 by 40. It's always 40 by 40. It has a 10-foot circle. Everything's the same. The chairs are 6 feet away from the mat. There's nothing different here. You just do what you do in the practice room, we'll be fine. If the fans boo you, a boo at another school is a cheer for you because they can't stand you because you're good. If they don't boo, that means you're pretty bad because they know they're going to beat you. So if you get the loudest boo in the house, you're pretty good. Okay? So I said make a way home, wrestle the opponent, not his reputation. Nate Carr told me this. Nate's a great guy, a preacher in Macon. Then he moved up to Ohio. He's a silver medalist in the Olympics. His son just made the U.S. Olympic team. Great wrestling family. The Carrs, I think, had 10 kids that eventually wrestled NCAA. 3 or 4 of them have made the Olympic team. But he stayed with me a week when we did our camp, Brickyard Wrestling Camp. And he said, I would take my brother's warm-up and put it on. And he said, that gained me 3 points. Because they saw the name Carr, they thought it was my brother. They're already worried. So he said, told our kids, wrestle your opponent, not his reputation. So many people go in, they're defeated when they go in because, oh, that's Nate Carr. Oh, this guy. You know, Dan Gable, the greatest wrestler maybe in American history, he lost his last match in college because a kid said, I'm going to beat that guy. I don't care who he is. And it worried Dan Gable. He said, what guy could think he could beat me? And he beat him. The only match Gable ever lost in his life was his senior year of college to a guy that wasn't famous at all, but he's famous for beating Dan Gable. You know, so, yeah, I think those things, what are a couple others like? You must dream it to achieve it. I always tell the kids, you have to see yourself on the podium. I mean, see your uniform. See people shaking your hand. I mean, until you dream it or until you believe it, you won't achieve it. So visualize it. I mean, this, just to digress a little bit, I had prostate cancer, pretty bad. They said you might make it 5 years. That was 10 years ago. And I would go to the pool over at the YMCA, and I'd close my eyes and visualize a knight in white armor stabbing the cancer cells and throwing them out my mouth. Now, did that help me? I don't know, but it sure didn't hurt because I was visualizing getting rid of it. And it's the same thing with prayer. Prayer is a visualization of better things happening. Yes. Okay, everybody has their own way to achieve it, but until you believe it, I don't believe you can be. If you don't believe you're going to be a state champion, you won't be. Now, some people believe it and they still don't achieve it, but the goal is the journey anyway. If you don't make it there, you didn't make it there, but at least you believed you were going to make it there. So again, that's the whole psychology of these things, these little, I call them Morganisms because my last name is Morgan. I gave them 10 Morganisms, and those things just to remind them, you know, and again, stay in the present. I see people worried about, oh, I don't know if we're going to win. I say, don't even think about winning. In wrestling, I break the match into 3 2-minute segments. Let's win the first period. Then let's go to the second. Don't think about the end result. The end result will take care of itself. You just worry about the process, executing your moves, and you'll be fine. The score will take care of itself, you know.
Wow, that's brilliant. I would love to hear more of those Morganisms.
Yeah, and they change all the time. I did a banquet for Tommy Sanders over at Smith Station, the wrestling coach. They're a great wrestling coach. And my whole speech was just my 10 Morganisms, and I went through each one. And the wrestlers, some of them were writing them down. I didn't have the little cards, but yeah, I think they could just look at those sometimes, and sometimes I need to look at them and remind myself, you know, here I'm talking about, don't worry about the results, and I'm worried about winning state, you know what I'm saying? So that's important. Centers us.
Oh, man. Well, listen, we're getting close to the end of the segment, but there's one question I'd like to ask you, Larry. What piece of advice would you give to a young coach? Starting out in the business, yeah. What would you tell them?
Well, the first thing is take stuff from other people, but make it your own program. Don't become a copycat. That won't work. You've got to be you. Okay, so I've learned a lot of things from every coach I coached under is in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I coached under 4 coaches. They're all in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. All great guys. I learned from them. I wasn't so concerned about being a head coach. Honestly, as a head coach, I know the people who do most coaching are my assistants anyway. I've always tried to hire people better than me in the room. I was lucky in Columbus because we had Fort Benning in the world-class athlete program. So those guys would come in and roll with our kids. And these are world champion type people. So surround yourself with good people. Make it your own program, and then treat kids fairly, not equally, not the same, but fairly. But yeah, you have to put your own imprint on your program. That's successful coaches. And, you know, at the beginning, don't worry about winning and losing, but worry about developing a culture. So if you're not there, practice runs exactly the same. I could be in a math meeting, and I know my captains will run practice just as good as I do or better. They're usually tougher than me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, surround yourself with good people. I think the University of Missouri has a great saying that they use for their wrestling team. It's choose right. In everything you do is simple. Choose right.
Mm-hmm.
As a person, choose right. As a wrestler, choose right. And I think if you do that, you talk about servant leadership, just make the right choices. That sums it up in 2 words.
Yep. Mine was always, and I had this on my wall in every classroom I ever taught in, was just do the right thing.
Yeah.
Do the right thing. When in doubt, do the right thing. And it was my first rule in my classroom. In my class rules that I gave, and then I would go through some rules, and I would say, see number 1. Refer back to number 1. If you're doing number 1, all these other things are going to take care of themselves. And I've used that with my sons, and I work for a man now who has that posted all over the building for the employees. When they go out the door, they see this big sign, and on there it says, "Do the right thing." And a lot of people don't realize that if you just strive to do that every day, your success is going to come. You don't have to force it. All you have to do is just do the right thing, make the right choices, make the right decision. And a lot of that other stuff just falls into place behind in the aftermath of doing the right thing. And I think that's huge for not only coaches, but for heads of companies, for crew leaders, for bosses on the floor at a retail store, whatever position you're in. If you're in any kind of leadership at all, or if you're just in solo business and you're leading yourself, let that be your mantra: do the right thing. And
I've always appreciated the state champion who the first thing they do after the match is go up and start cleaning the stands, picking up the trash. I'm saying that's a leader. That's the guy I want in my program. One thing that when I went to Columbus High, they weren't used to winning, and we did go to the state duels. And one of my senior captains, we got beat in the second round pretty bad, like 40-some to 20. And he goes, we don't even deserve to be here. I said, I think you're right. I said, go sit with your parents in the stands. Coach, what? You're not serious. I'm dead serious. Go sit with your parents in the stands. I got a freshman out of the stands, brought him down to wrestle in states. Okay? I said, you're now the team captain because you just took his place. I said, but we are going to belong. Every time we go over here, we're going to do our best, and we do belong here. We achieved it, okay? And if you don't believe it, you'll be up there with my senior supposed captain sitting with his parents. That's how you develop the culture, that there are no superstars, that you're replaceable, and again, do the right thing. You're a captain. You don't say, we don't deserve to be here. Yeah, you do. And these other guys deserve it, so maybe you don't. So it goes back to what would you tell a young coach? Set an example. I mean, again, do the right thing. Choose right. That wasn't the right thing for him to say that, so we just moved on. And after that, we had no problem.
And I think you won state at Columbus. Is that right?
Yeah, we won state in 2006. With we have 56 individual champions at Brookstone and Beechwood and Columbus, but the team title, we won the team title at Columbus. We were second twice. At Brookstone, we were third and fourth a couple times. Brookstone problem was it was hard to fill 14 weight classes. One year we took third in the state. We only took 7 kids out of 14 weights, but we had 6 in the finals and 1 took third, but we just didn't have the depth. But
you got to have that depth. You got to have somebody in there. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, Larry, it's been an honor to have you on here, man. I think I can speak for Mike. I can say we'd love to have you back. This is
absolutely.
This is exactly.
It's been fun, and we miss you at trivia.
Oh, maybe I need to start doing Zooming on Wednesday nights. I really miss that too. It's a lot of fun, that trivia, man. And when they roll out the 80s music, we're pretty much unbeatable.
We'll have to check the rules. I think the guy who runs the trivia, see if we can Zoom you in.
Yeah, we'll check it out, man. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Everybody would say we were cheating because they couldn't keep their eye on you. You might be looking up something while you're on camera. And and give us the right answer. But but anyway, we do have a great time on Wednesday nights, and Larry's wife Elaine and I taught next door to each other for a year at St. Luke, and got to know each other that way. And they are an education family. Both of them are educators and have been for a long time, and they do a great job, and they continue to do a great job. And eventually, Larry, y'all are going to retire, right? Really,
we have officially retired. One thing I do want to mention is my wife was the head wrestling coach at Shaw High School, and we actually met in the state finals at Gwinnett Center. She was at Shaw, and I was at Columbus High. We met in the finals. I got all dressed up, suit and tie. She wore jeans and a T-shirt, and one of the people said, "Miss Morgan, aren't you going to get dressed for the state finals?" She said, "I don't have to get dressed to kick his ass." So I said, "Oh, okay." so anyway, luckily my guy won 2-1 in overtime, and as I tell people, the couch was real comfortable that night.
Oh man, I want to tell one last story before we leave too about service. In 2001, my son was at a baseball player. My oldest boy, Chip, was a baseball player up at Augusta State, and he had a terrible accident at midnight one night, and we didn't know if he's going to live or die. And we get that phone call in the middle of the night. Well, we got Tyler, our youngest. He's what was he? 8 years old, and so we had to take off to Augusta for 12 days. Leave our house. And Larry Morgan and Elaine took Tyler, our son, and without asking any questions, and took him to school, took him to his events. They took care of him like he was their own during one of the most critical times in our life. We'll never have a worse situation than that, And of course, it turned out fine. Chip's okay, and he's the guy who does the trivia on Wednesday night. But I will never forget that, and that is a perfect example of service. You step up. That's what we name in this show, and did something for somebody and asked nothing in return. And it's interesting too that we talked about guys tonight with no feet, and we got a program named Step Up, and just the irony of that is just amazing. So Larry, I tell you, man, I got all the respect in the world for you, man, and I hope that even when you leave the profession, you still a part of these kids. These coaches, they're going to still need a guy like you to help them. So maybe we can get you in our nonprofit. We're trying to teach coaches and present information, research to coaches about servant leadership. Maybe we could lean on your wisdom, help us with that.
I know Elaine and I are planning on going. My special ed kids work at Feeding the Valley on Wednesdays. And we're planning on going there, even though we retired, going over there on Wednesdays and help box groceries and stuff like that. Great project for the kids. And, it's a lot of fun. And it's like you say, it's a good service. But anytime you need anything. And I know any of us would do the same thing. We'd drop everything in a minute to help each other.
That's friendship. So, we appreciate it. And
I appreciate you having me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thank you for being with us. And as we always say, Larry Morgan's another one of those guys that was willing at different times and still is willing to this day to step up and make a difference. And he's made the difference in a lot of lives, as most of the coaches we've talked to have and will continue to do. And Larry, we appreciate you joining us. And folks, keep watch on who we're going to have next week. You never know who's going to pop up here on Step Up, Make a Difference. And we'll try to let you know during the week who that might be next week. But for this time, share this around. Make sure everybody knows that we've got a true Hall of Famer with us this week in Larry Morgan, and get it out there and get this in front of more people so that more people can learn from these guys just how to step up and make a difference. We'll see you all next week